Hey everyone, welcome to Little Firefly Artworks. This video is going to be the first of a series in which I will be drawing this bird, which is a Variegated Fairy Wren. I am using toned tan paper with Prismacolor pencils, and the background, when I get up to that point, will be a pastel background, which is something I've never done before now, so bear with me, I'm still learning. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what art means to me as an artist. I started drawing in early primary school and pretty much haven't put a pencil down since. I never really received any kind of specific instruction. A lot of what I know I've taught myself. I'm sure a lot of artists feel the same way, and I wanted to have this YouTube channel as a place where I can talk about my techniques in a way that other people who are watching might learn a little bit about the mediums that I'm using. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm happy to share what I know if it will potentially help someone else explore art. This drawing is the first in a study, but I'm trying to get a portfolio of artworks ready to put in a gallery. And the subject that I've selected to make my study for was native Australian birds, because I've always been drawn to birds. This particular bird is my mum's favorite, and it's one that she's asked me to draw ever since I started drawing with the Prismacolor pencils. I've only been using the Prismacolor pencils for a few months. I have always wanted to purchase them after seeing one of my fellow artists when I was younger use them and just being completely blown away by the amount of detail you could get in and how versatile they were with how much you could layer on top of color. So I've really enjoyed teaching myself how to use this particular medium, and this is the third drawing that I have done using these pencils. As you can see for this particular video, I've already done part of the sketch. That's mainly because I didn't get the idea to record myself drawing until I had already done most of the sketch for this bird. But I've got from here on out for you guys, and I'll talk through my process as we go through. Thank you for joining me. With all the sketching out of the way, it's time to get on to the fun stuff. One thing I learned pretty early on using the Prismacolor pencils is, especially if you're using the lighter colors, it's better to erase the graphite guidelines that you put in first, because once you put a layer of Prismacolor over the top of them, you cannot get rid of those lines. The first color I've chose to start with as a base layer is True Blue. I work in using small circular motions because the feathers themselves are circular in shape, and I find that using the same shape when you're coloring mimics the same texture that the feathers give off. Originally I was trying to build depth with the True Blue, but it wasn't really giving me the effect that I wanted, so I tried to layer on depth with a darker blue, and I have no idea how to pronounce this. Indanthrone blue. I used it to kind of try and build shadow underneath some of the feathers towards the back of the bird's neck, but as you can see, it's way too dark. But the thing that I'm loving about these pencils is that if you do a layer that's a little bit too dark or it's not quite the right color, you can correct that with another layer of color on top of it. The bird is not quite the exact color of the True Blue. It has more of a turquoise hue, and I was a little bit too nervous to try achieving that by going straight for a green and blending on top of the blue and hoping for the best. So I started a little bit more tamer with a non-photo blue. I worked it lightly over the darker blues to blend it out, again working in a circular pattern. When I'm adding bigger sections of color like this, I try to keep my pressure really light, which is something that I read on a tutorial for using the Prismacolor pencils, because it helps you to build depth later on. If you go in straight at the start and use full pressure, you won't really have a lot of wiggle room later to add more layers on top of that. Now I've moved into colouring the top of the bird's back, which is more of a purpley toned blue. So I've worked in cobalt blue hue as the base colour and plan to blend a couple of colours on top of that because it's not a perfect match. So for this part of the bird's neck, I'm working in with a different texture to what I was when I was doing the face. The feathers on the bird's face are a lot rounder in shape, whereas the ones here kind of look a little bit more like fur. So in order to mimic that, I'm using short line strokes. I tend to kind of swap between different parts of a drawing if I'm feeling a little bit intimidated. I don't know how many other people do the same thing, but it's something that I noticed a lot going back and watching over this recording, because before now I'd never actually videoed myself doing an artwork before, but it's probably something you guys are going to pick up on the more videos that I do end up putting out. My plan for this section of the bird's back was to make it more of a gradient, because closer to the neck is more of a purple shade, but it kind of lightens out to more of a bluer shade, so kind of similar to the face but a little bit darker. So here I'm coming in again with the true blue, and I'm using it to build in a lighter layer of blue, which is more towards the middle of the bird's back. And I'm not sure if you guys can pick up on it, but I've actually corrected where the middle of the bird's back is. To correct that, I'm just working in and basically putting the line in a little bit closer to the bird's neck with the color. And then it's more of what I said before, so going over with a light layer so that I can build on that later with different pigments. I was a little bit nervous to start using purples on the bird's back because I wasn't quite sure how that blending process would go. So instead, I have gone back to the bird's face and I'm now working in highlights. The color I'm using here is Sky Blue Light. It's pretty close to the color of the bird's feathers. There is still a little bit more of a green tone, but I'm gonna see what I can do just by using this one as a highlight and see if I still need to go over with a little bit of a more green tone. I'm using pretty firm pressure here at the moment because this is a layer that I kind of want to push into the paper a little bit more because I want more of the pigment to show up at the end. And here you see me erasing my graphite guidelines so that I can go in with this highlight and not worry about being able to see them at the end. And because I did do a little bit more of the coloring before I erased these, I've had to be really careful when I am erasing the graphite. The erasers don't take as much of the color off as they do graphite, but I still want to be really careful that I don't remove any of the pigment. As I work back over the other layers of color that I've already put down, I'm using a bit more of a lighter pressure and focusing on the areas of the bird's face where the light is hitting. So when I come across those areas, I'm pushing a little bit harder because I want that pigment to stick out a lot more than the pigments underneath it. Otherwise, I'm just using the Sky Blue Light to lighten some of the areas where the true blue and the non-photo blue are not quite light enough. And new day, new clothes. Here I come in, I'm working some of the feather details into the wren's face. Some of the feathers at the front of its nose stick up a little bit. I'm using very sharp movements to draw those feathers. I'm also pressing quite hard because I want this pigment to stand out above any other layers that I do later on. And now that I've lightened most of the area of the wren's face, I'm working back in with the other colors and just building on layers to add texture and color variation. And from now on, unless I'm introducing a new color, I'll just have a pop-up on the side so that you know what color I'm using. I noticed here that the neck wasn't quite how I wanted it to be shaped, so I'm working back in with the true blue to try and correct that shape a little bit more. Here you see me come in with slate grey. I'm trying to still achieve more of the silvery look that I was originally going for. I did feel, however, that the slate grey was slightly too dark, so I layered over the top of it. I did use it as a way to build some shadows on the bird's head, mainly towards the bottom of the bird's head, near the neck. And here I'm bringing in the final highlight color, which is always my favorite part of drawing with these pencils because of how much it pops. I'm going over the sky blue light highlight with white. I'm just mainly focusing this on any areas where the light in my reference photo is directly hitting the bird and shining off the feathers. And I'm also using it to make certain areas of the bird's face more pale. Similarly to when I went in using sky blue light, I'm using a very firm pressure most of the time when I'm applying this. It's only in the areas where I just want it to lighten or pale a little bit that I'm going in with a lighter pressure. Moving back to the wren's back, I've finally worked up the courage to add more of the purple tones. When you look at the wren, the blue is more of a warm toned blue, and I was really nervous to add purple because I thought going straight in with the purples that I have would be way too purple, but I'm hoping that I can blend it out with other colors. The first purple shade that I decided to use is more of a blue toned purple. It's violet blue. It was a bit darker than what I wanted, so I tried experimenting again with just violet, which was still a bit dark, but I managed to get what I wanted by blending it out with more of the cobalt blue hue and sky blue light for the highlights. I did add more highlights using white, but instead of using it as a block highlight color, I went in with a light pressure so that I could lighten the colors that I was already using. Going back to the bird's head as well, I still wasn't happy with the color and I wanted it to be a little bit more of a turquoise hue. So I got brave and decided to experiment using pale sage. I've mainly focused on the lighter areas of the bird's face, so mainly the areas where I used a lot of the sky blue light and white in combination, because that's in the reference photo, the main place where I can see the green tone in the blue. And I think I got it pretty spot on. I did work back over with sky blue light and a few of my other blue tones just to help blend it in a little bit better. So once I was happy with how the feathers on the face were looking, I moved into working on the beak. The first color that I used when working on the top of the wren's beak was 70% warm gray. It's kind of a more purple toned gray, and it looks very similar to the reference photo. I initially start out using a light pressure as per usual, and then press harder when adding shading and details. To smooth out some of the areas where light is hitting the beak, I'm using 30% cool grey, and I alternate between using 70% warm grey and 30% cool grey until I like the contrast between the two. I'm kind of using the cool grey as a blender. It did really help doing this using a very sharp pencil. With the main contrast done, I work in the darker shadows with black. Once I've finished adding all of the black shadows, I then moved to doing the lower part of the beak, and I started with 90% cool grey because it is a lot darker than the top part of the beak, and it has more of a blue tone which matches the cool grey. Once I had finished doing the bottom part of the beak, I then added the highlights. And here you see me further obsessing over my feather details. I'm working in more of the blues and blending and just trying to build more depth. My camera stopped recording now without my knowledge, but here's a mostly complete wren head I prepared earlier. And look at me pretending to add more black so I can try and make it look like I did it. I have kind of gone back over to try and just show you what I was doing, which is working black into the collar around the wren's neck. I followed the edges of the blue feathers and made them sharper, which helped having a super sharp pencil, and then I gradually increased pressure with the circle patterns to smooth out the black side. And here you see me obsessing again over the feather details. I'm using 3 or 4 different colors to try and just build depth and blend a little bit more color into it. Then you see me working into the darker patch midway down the wren's back. Here I'm using 90% cool grey, and later on I regret how much of this I end up colouring in. Here you see me adjusting the sketch to change the feather shape for the wings. There were some proportions that I noticed were a bit out and I wanted to try and fix that. And here you see me figure out why I wish I had have not coloured in as much of the cool grey. I had kind of stuffed up the proportions a little bit, and I'm trying to fix that now by using an eraser, trying several different types of erasers that I have to remove as much of the cool grey pigment as I can, which wasn't very much, before fixing the sketch up. I'm not too worried though, because I know how much I can build upon layers with these pencils. I'm just really hoping that at the end you won't notice a difference. I just wanted to thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. This is, as I said at the start of the video, the first episode for this particular project, and there are a total of 9 more artworks revolving around birds that are yet to come. I haven't decided yet on what medium each is going to be, but as an artist, I've always loved to explore. If you would like to stay updated with my process of drawing this fairy wren, please make sure to like and subscribe. Otherwise, in between my videos, if you would like to see more updates, please feel free to follow my socials, which are linked in the description below. Thank you, have a wonderful week, and don't forget to stay inspired.